Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. This is Charles from the channel Books on Stereo, and I'm here to bring you guys another episode of In Conversation. I have Bethany from Beautifully Bookish Bethany. I'll link her channel down below so you guys can go subscribe to her channel. She's absolutely awesome. But today we're going to be talking about a slightly spicy topic, and it is about cancel culture and how that kind of ties in with accountability in the Booktube community. Now, I think this is a very interesting discussion to have just in general with like the proliferation of social media and how that kind of corresponds to book and the publishing industry and the book community as well, because it has changed quite a things about how we kind of function in this platform, because social media is still relatively new. And I think it's interesting to talk about it in terms of BookTube, but I will preface these are our opinions and our opinions alone. If you disagree or you think something's particularly harmful, just let me or either Bethany know, and I'll be sure to address it in a video, in a short, or in the comment section down below. But without further ado, let's get into the topic. What do you think about cancel culture in general and how it relates to BookTube? So we're starting pretty high level.
Yeah. I think it's a complicated topic because I feel like people tend to sort of like polarize on it. And I think the reality, in my opinion, is somewhere in between. I think that it can definitely go too far, but I also think that sometimes it can be an important and necessary tool of people without power to hold people with power accountable. So I'm not opposed to it, but I also think people like to, because it's become a hot phrase. And so I also think you see people saying, oh, that's cancel culture, where I'm like, well, actually it's not.
Yeah.
like so I mean, like, I guess that's the thing, is like sometimes people say everything is cancel culture, but I mean that's the thing, is like, for instance, somebody being found guilty of criminal activity and being held accountable for it, like the governor of the state I live in, Cuomo, for New York, for instance, that is not cancel culture. That is, there was an and like there have been people saying that, but like that was an investigation into criminal activity of like sexual harassment and stuff. He was found guilty and then chose to step down before he was impeached. Like, but then you get people saying, oh, it's cancel culture. I'm like, that's not cancel culture.
That's not.
It's not.
Yeah, and I completely agree. I think one of the things that I've noticed specifically in the BookTube community, I think just with social media, it takes a lot of the impersonal, like the personal exchange of things. So someone can go on their Twitter and like pull up someone's video and like tag them in it and say, hey, this is da-da-da, this he said da-da-da or whatever. And then usually just because Twitter is like really just a lot of hot takes most of the time, it tends to be everyone's like, okay, let's cancel this person. Like, but canceling, like, what does that even mean? Like, I think someone made a video saying like you're canceled one day and then you're uncanceled the next. It's like a weird thing that I think almost everyone will get canceled at some point in the BookTube community, because we might say something that may not jive with someone else, and then all of a sudden we're being called like, cancel this booktuber, da da da, they did XYZ. But like you said, also, I do think it is a way to hold people in power accountable. But I also think it can be weaponized as a tool to attack like another person or an entity, when sometimes we're human and we're going to make mistakes. I think cancel culture inherently, like the way sometimes it's used, it doesn't really allow for you making a mistake or like saying a wrong fact in a video without everyone just kind of jumping on you. Because then even in BookTube on YouTube, that video gains traction. So it gets put through the algorithm, and then everyone sees this video, and then it just takes on a life of its own.
Yes.
And it's hard to kind of come back for that, because everyone's still going to pull up that video and say like, well, you said this, this, and this, and this, and this. You can make an apology, but that still doesn't excuse the fact. So what do you think about kind of like the weaponization almost of cancel culture in the BookTube community?
Yeah, I think Twitter especially can be difficult with this, because frequently there can be sort of this like gleeful piling on, and sometimes it's warranted and other times it's like, okay, somebody made a mistake. Is there space for them to have the opportunity to apologize, learn, grow, do better. And I don't know I mean, this isn't specifically because I know you're talking, and we could talk about this too, about creators, but like the thing that comes to mind with this for me is seeing lists of canceled authors, for instance, that were going around for a while. And the problem with that to me, when if you have like a list of don't buy this author because X, Y, like it's I guess I am totally fine saying, hey, here are some authors I'm choosing not to support for these reasons. Make your own choice. Like I've done that. I don't have a problem with that. What's different is when somebody's like, here's a list of bad authors that you shouldn't
Don't buy from
support,
them.
right?
Mhm.
With no detail, because sometimes I would look at those lists and I'm like, okay, there's an author who, yeah, they did something, but they apologized and took it out of their book. Why are they on the list? Or like you'll have a person on a list because like they won't be differentiated, but I might know, okay, this person on the list like put a slightly questionable thing in a book that they later apologized for, and this person sexually assaulted somebody. Like, but they're on the,
But they're on the same list.
right? I mean, so and if you're not saying that explicitly, that becomes censorship, and that becomes a problem. So I don't know.
And I think that even relates to when the term problematic was being used quite often in the book community. Like I remember infamously the Carve the Mark, or I think by
Yeah.
Veronica Roth or
Roth.
something like that. Everyone, and like it was going about how this book was like racist and da 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 da. And I think I saw Francina Simone actually come out with a video like actually having read the book and said like, no, 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 no. Like this is what the author was actually trying to do. But then it was taken out, labeled as problematic, and just disseminated to everyone in the booktube community. And since it's Twitter, a lot of times you don't have that much information. You don't necessarily want to like go deep. I would say for the average user, you're not going to want to go and do a deep dive on whatever's happening. You're like, oh, this hot take, let me retweet it, or let me like retweet it with a quote and like say like, oh, this is horrible, and then just you're kind of passively participating in that type of sense. But like I think too, like especially for like debut authors nowadays, I remember Emily, I forgot what it was, a YA book.
Yeah,
where she
Emily
was
Duncan. Are you thinking of Emily Duncan?
No, it was like a Russian inspired dark.
Emily Duncan.
Was it Emily Duncan? I remember like it was like a book where like the author got bullied so much that she pulled the debut book, and that was published like a year later.
No. That wasn't Russian. I know what you're
Do you know what book I'm talking?
Yes. Is it Blood Air? That one is Asian. It's like South Asian or East Asian.
I just remember there was like a girl on the cover, like Asian descent, and like a castle underneath. Like in the comments, if you know the book, you can drop it. But I remember that one. The author got so much hate.
Yes.
And the book wasn't even out. Yeah. That she pulled it. And I think it got later released like a year later, but then it didn't do nearly as well.
Yeah.
It's like the book eventually got canceled.
Emily Duncan got canceled. That was the other thing. That was like for bullying other authors and having some like anti-Semitic stuff in her books. I mean, that was fair.
That was cancelable.
Yeah. However, I will say it's messy. Okay. I followed this whole thing. So like, yes, she absolutely messed up, but some of her kind of friends got lumped in with her. Which like, look, yes, if you see a friend doing something, like you should hold them accountable, but also I don't know that there was like differentiation made initially. And then the other piece of it is that some of the people who were calling her out for bullying have themselves been known to bully other authors. And so I'm like, okay. It's messy. I mean, is what it is.
Yeah. It is. It's like almost like the thing, like if you participate in the beast, like that is cancel culture, eventually you're gonna find yourself almost like, even if you have the best intentions, like we're all like, you can be on top of the world the next day, and then the other day someone finds a video and they're like, all of a sudden you're at the bottom and you're like on everyone's cancel list. It's like a slippery slope. I think it's something that we all deal with as creators. That we may say something that may rub our audiences the wrong way, or we may do something, but I think that kind of ties into the accountability portion that, yes, it's good to hold people accountable, but I also think it's good to practice like some type of allowance for forgiveness or allowing a creator to get better.
Yeah.
Like personally for me, like if I do something wrong, I'm much more receptive if someone sends me a message through like a DM or an email and say, "Hey, I like this kind of rubbed me the wrong way in your video. Are you going to address it?" We can have that conversation. But when you bring it to a platform and all of a sudden you see like, hold on, who like mentioned me on something,
Yeah.
and it already takes off like automatically
Yeah.
from there, it's hard to. I get like part of like that's kind of like the accountability, like holding people in power.
Yeah.
But sometimes I always think of like, is there like a necessary? It has to be an aim to that accountability. Like, what are you trying to do? Like,
Yeah.
are you just like kind of like putting their name out there and just bringing attention to it? Is it a learning moment for every? I think for all of these situations, it should be in some type of way of learning situation
Yeah.
that you should learn and grow from and get better.
Ideally. I mean, some people
Ideally,
don't,
like that's not
but
an ideal
ideally, yeah,
situation
yeah.
because we all make mistakes, and I definitely think a lot of things that get us like canceled or get us called out, it comes from like an honest mistake.
Yeah.
And sometimes you weren't intending to do that. And you're like, okay.
Yeah, well, and I think sometimes you're just not aware of things. I mean, because I think all of us on our time, like being on YouTube, you're going to make mistakes. I've made mistakes with things, and I appreciate the people who've privately been like, "Hey, like I'm concerned about this thing, or this thing bothered me," and then I can be like, and sometimes it's something that I just said off the cuff and didn't think about, and I'm like, "Oh, yeah, you're right. That's not. I'm sorry. Let me fix that." Um, and so, and then I can learn and grow and move forward because we're all constantly learning. Um, but to your point, it's complicated because on the one hand, I understand that there can be a power differential, especially if there's a big power differential that some people aren't necessarily comfortable with reaching out directly to a creator or feel like they won't be heard. I mean, I do feel like best practice is probably to at least try, like at least try to send a message or an email or something. And if that doesn't, like if you don't get a response, assuming you do it, and this is,
Like, assuming
I
you do it in
mean,
good faith, you
assuming
don't
you do
message
it
the
in
person
good
and say,
faith.
like, you don't just message the person like, you
Right.
suck. Why
Right.
did you do this? Like,
Right.
you hurt my feelings. End of
Right.
message.
Right. Yeah. I mean, so it's funny. In a former job, I had a manager who was great, and we talked a lot about how to give feedback that is more likely to be accepted, which was very interesting. And so I was taught to use "I wonder" statements. And so instead of saying, "Why did you do this? You should have done it this way," you might be like, "Yeah, I wonder if you tried this other thing, how that would go." And then it invites the other person into considering, "Oh, yeah, I wonder." you know so it's just interesting. Like, there are definitely ways to give feedback and be critical in a way that like actually like is less likely to put people's walls up. And so I try to do that if I'm ever in a position to try to give feedback. And it is interesting because I think but it's hard. Not everybody like knows how to do that, and I don't know. It's
Yeah,
complicated.
it's complicated and messy, like you said. Like I get it. Like I feel like just in general, BookTube has become more complicated with social media.
Yeah.
Just in terms of what I remember, there was like I remember content warnings and trigger warnings. Like that discussion didn't really exist 10 or 15 years ago. Like it may have been there, but
Hmm.
not nearly on the level where if an author says I won't put contents or trigger warnings, everyone's like in the book, like hold up, hold up, hold up. Like your dark romance or whatever you are, like you have to have some type of content warnings or trigger warnings somewhere for people so they don't get like some of the like the sensitivity
Yeah.
in terms of like topics that you discuss in your books. Like I don't remember that being a huge topic that was talked about a lot in the booktube community. But
Yeah.
now it's more talked about and like with social media, having authors be in that same space as like readers and reviewers. Like you still have like etiquette issues with like readers tagging authors and narrators in negative reviews or like
Oh,
negative
don't do
reading
that. Please,
updates.
people, don't do that.
But it like happens and like it's the same thing of like holding creators
Yeah.
responsible, or just like another booktuber or someone who's in the book community. I think it doesn't even have to be like between someone who's in the book community and like a creator. It can be like just a book on book persons, and then all of a sudden you're just like, what's happening? Why is this person calling this person out? And like, I prefer like just like you said, just like DMing me and letting me know what is happening. I think just in general, it's hard to not almost be put on the defensive when all of a sudden it's already out there and you're reacting to it.
Yeah.
It almost feels like, especially if there's that power imbalance, you don't want to seem like you're badgering the person. Like, I did not do this. Like, da 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 da. I meant this. So like, sometimes like Twitter is great for getting news, getting information, getting updates, seeing what's happening. But I also think it's not the best place. Or Instagram mentions.
No.
Or on YouTube comments, it's not the best place because like it's hard to judge tone, and this is like some like OG, like old person mentality coming out before social media. Like it's just a messy process. But do you have any ways that we can like try to make it a little bit more healthier while still keeping its core intentions? Because I think they are valid, and I think they are needed, especially for holding publishers accountable for the books they publish.
Yeah, I mean, I think if we're talking about individual creators, ideally, like at least attempt some kind of a private interaction if you can. And no, but I think if you're able to at least try, and maybe they won't be receptive to that, and maybe then you know, like I think there are definitely cases where, or if it's, you know, I mean, and also understanding the difference between something that was a mistake or something they could learn from versus something that's really serious that maybe needs to be addressed publicly. And I think that's something to try to use judgment on. I'm very I'm very wary of when Twitter becomes less about actually being like, hey, this thing is happening and this is a problem, and more about sort of glee at other people's downfall. That makes me really uncomfortable. I also think, okay, so there's a couple of creators who are not booktubers who I follow and I think are fantastic, and they both have a couple of interesting videos that I would recommend about this. So, so one is Lindsay Ellis. Or do you watch her? I love her.
I watch her.
She's so great. But she's got a video called Mask Off where she addresses herself being canceled. And it's really interesting because one of the things she talks about is people who will dredge up every time stuff from years ago, some of which isn't accurate, some of which she had apologized for then, and yet it's still like, oh, well, you know, she did this and she did this, and she's like, oh, okay. And so I think that's an interesting look at this issue we're talking about, of like allowing people for space to grow and learn. And then I just saw I recently actually decided to become a Patreon of ContraPoints because I just love her and I love what she does so much. She's so great. And I was like, you know what? I'm gonna support you with like a few dollars a month. So anyway, but she has her most recent video is fascinating. It's about envy, and she does these, like, have you watched her?
No, I haven't.
Okay, she's amazing. She's a trans woman who studied philosophy, and so she's brilliant, and she does these like elaborate costumes and set designs talking about deep philosophical things, but is like funny. Her videos are amazing. Like, if you haven't seen her, definitely check her out. Natalie from ContraPoints. But her most recent video is about envy, and it was so interesting to me watching it because it made me think of this conversation that comes up in the book community on a regular basis about buying books. Okay. And there's like, well, you shouldn't, it's consumerism, or it's this, or it's that. And it was really interesting to me hearing her kind of unpack what is envy and what drives. And I was like, I think this is about envy, possibly, this is like a whole bigger conversation to have, but it's really interesting because like I think there are like good reasons to buy physical books, especially if you're doing it sustainably and you're able to afford to do it. And sometimes I think there's this resentment that can come from, which like is fair, but like there can be resentment for coming from people who don't have the same access because of maybe where they live or their financial status or whatever. And like I understand those feelings, but I also think that there's value if you're able to purchase books. I mean, you're like, number one, it's something that retains value pretty well. You're supporting authors. Often, like at least with me, like probably at least half of the books that I'm purchasing are also supporting marginalized authors who I want to support in publishing. Like, so I think there's a lot of value to do that if you're able to. But I just think it's interesting. Like there's this anger and resentment that comes out in a lot of times in those conversations. And watching her video, I was like, I wonder if that's like the factor, like if that's what's happening there.
That is really interesting because I can see a lot of people like having hate towards unhauling videos, where it says like I unhauled 100 books or something, like the opposite. Because like you're saying like I bought all these 100 books, but now I no longer want them, so I'm just going to donate them because I have that ability to do so. It's like that is really interesting.
Yeah,
and like it kind of ties into the idea of like excited to like watch people. Some people will like to watch people's downfall on Twitter and like participate in that madness.
Yeah.
I think that maybe like may tie into that envy point too that you made, because like they have followers, they have status, they have all these things, and it's like, oh, look at that person like who has 100,000 followers.
Yeah.
I just posted a tweet, and now they're just dropping subscribers left, right, and center.
Yeah. Well, I do think it's interesting, right? Because I think frequently people get more upset when people with large platforms do things. Whereas if somebody with a smaller platform did the same thing, like they probably wouldn't care. So, I mean, and like to be fair, right? I do feel like there's a sense of responsibility if you have a large platform. And like mine is not huge for Booktube, but it's, I mean, like mid-size. And so like the larger it gets, I do feel a responsibility to do the best that I can, to be, in the way that I talk about things and how I handle things, and like being aware that I'm not hurting people or causing harm. I do think that's important. But I just think it's interesting that there can be such a disparity in reactions.
Yeah, that's true. And I think I hate to bring in gender as well, depending on the types of genres that you read on BookTube. But let's say it's very different for me being a romance reader, because that's typically more female dominated. So I can easily see myself if I make some like inflammatory, like if I say, oh, the heroine in this book should have done X, Y, and Z, and that's why she would have avoided X, Y, Z happening to her. Mm-hmm. I'm like, and I can see that reverse situation happening if you're like in a more male dominated genre like fantasy or sci-fi,
right?
And how those people react to whatever content or controversy is happening at this time.
Yeah.
And it's interesting too, because with cancel culture, is that it can actually lead to people losing like deals or losing jobs in some cases if it blows up. And like, especially if it's like just a random author, a baby debut author. There's been so many horror stories of people weaponizing Goodreads and just spamming the book with like 1-star reviews. Like I sometimes see like over 1,000 1-star reviews, and the book has not even been released. Right. So when it does come out, that just hurts their sales. Like especially if the book isn't what was even, or if it went through edits and it changed. Most readers will not pay attention to that book anymore because it's basically been tarnished. So I think there's interesting like side effects, real world side effects that can happen.
Yeah.
That I think we really need to take into account when we're kind of talking about like creators or something happening in the BookTube community, that there's actually, especially if it's something that a person can come back from and learn, like giving them that space to say, hey, XYZ is wrong in your book, or XYZ actions are incorrect. Let them apologize and let their actions speak for what they do going forward.
Mm-hmm.
as like a remedy. So like give people that time and space to grow and
Yeah.
to really kind of have that time to actually learn from their actions. And I think Twitter and whole cancel culture really doesn't allow that too much in general in the booktube community to allow that space to grow for a lot of time, especially if you're a bigger creator or you're in a situation where you're kind of like the big head honcho. A lot of times people are just like, oh, nope, you're canceled. You're on this list forever.
Yeah.
And then you never get that chance. And it kind of like, what is like in psychology, like the negative feedback loop? You become what you say you are because like you're not allowed to really change people's perceptions. But I don't know where I was going with that.
I mean, I do think it's complicated though too, because and it's interesting, right? Because between what you said, I mean, number one, like from Goodreads, also just in general, there is a disparity as well in who doesn't get space to grow. Because I mean, the reality is that like there are people who are more privileged who are going to be given a lot more leeway. And even with the Goodreads thing, it's been interesting to watch because you're right, those reviews, the fake reviews or whatever can happen. And Goodreads can choose to step in and remove those reviews. But what's interesting is that usually the times they choose to do it tends to be for like white authors with big book deals.
Yeah.
And more marginalized authors who are more harmed by that, they tend to just kind of ignore it. And I think similarly, things like that can also happen with BookTube, where, you know, I mean, like some of the very, very top tier, young, white, pretty booktubers, like, you know, are given a lot of leeway. And other people are not. And so that's a thing.
Yeah, I think a lot of it too is like recognizing your own biases when you kind of participate, not participate, but when you're either the person like speaking out against someone, a person in power, or you're part of like some type of controversy that happens or whatever on Twitter. I think it's important to like kind of say like, if this was a different person, but just I think it's important just to keep in mind, like if this was a different person or in this situation, would I have reacted differently or would I have done things differently to this creator versus if I did some or versus if the same thing happened to another creator.
Right.
So I think if you're going to do it, at least make it fair and give people as much of a chance to grow and come back from their mistakes, because we're all just being online in general, you're going to say something that may not be correct in that moment, or there may be an old tweet that someone digs up like from like 5 years ago where you said something inflammatory, but like it's been dealt with for like years and years and years, but it kind of resurfaces all over again because social media likes to prioritize stuff that's messy because it gets clicks. But yeah, it's like,
I mean, people change so much. Like I think about the person that I was 10 years ago. I mean, I would be so canceled. I mean, cause like legitimately, because like 10 years ago, I was like in the final period of still being involved in evangelical Christianity. I had like very homophobic viewpoints about things. I mean, like I have changed dramatically in the last decade in who I am and like the way that I see the world. And, you know, it's taken a lot of time and work. But that's the thing is like if somebody was to go find like a Facebook post or something from 10 years ago, I probably said something that now I'd be like, yeah, I completely disagree with myself. So
yeah, I think it's whatever way you look at it, it's like it's at the end of the day, it's just messy.
Yeah.
It has this beautiful like merits and like good points to it, but ultimately I think it's just one of those things that's like almost going through this growing pains. Like we won't know exactly how to like give like good recommendations on how to necessarily navigate this time, because like we can come back in like 2 years, have the same conversation, and everything is completely changed. Like cancel culture may not be a thing anymore. It may just be like we just block you. It may be block culture. I don't know.
I'm okay
I don't
with
know
that.
what we're gonna evolve to. Like maybe soon people will just get their channels deleted after they just get blocked. That's just it.
Maybe.
You just get blocked. You just delete it forever on the internet.
Yeah. Oh man. Yeah, I mean I do think it's worth talking about like if you're a creator and you get canceled, like what should you do? Because And,
That's
you
a
know,
video.
because it's going to happen, right? Like at some point you're going to
Yeah.
make mistakes and you're going to do something wrong. You will. And like, I think the thing that I've learned is number one, do not respond immediately. Like,
Mm,
do not respond in the heat of the moment. And this is just as true if you get like negative or critical comments on your YouTube videos. Like, I've done that once and got called out on it. And I was like, you're right. I shouldn't have responded like in a
mhm,
flippant, in the moment way. I should have taken a moment. Like, so, like, take some time, breathe, think before you write or respond or speak. And then, like, I guess that's the thing. Like, I think sometimes there are things that you might be like, look, I don't think I did anything wrong. Um,
mm,
but before you decide that, consider like whether maybe you have blind spots, because that is possible. It's possible that you didn't. It's possible somebody took something out of context, right?
yeah.
It's also
Mhm,
possible. It's also possible that you have blind spots where you're not understanding where someone else is coming from and you need to understand more. And you should go talk to some people who might be able to give you some insight before you decide how to respond to it. Like, am I wrong here? Like, what, like that I think
mhm.
can be helpful. Like having friends you can run things by. And then if you messed up, own it. Don't say, I'm sorry if. Like, never
Yeah.
say, I'm sorry. I'm sorry if you felt bad. I'm sorry if I hurt your feelings. I'm sorry. Like, don't do that. Say, I'm sorry I did
X, Y, and Z. Yeah.
XYZ. Here's how I'm going to try to change things moving forward. And here's what I'm doing and considering. Like, I mean,
Mhm.
and then do it. And if people want to be jerks, block them. I mean,
That was like a purple inspirational message, and you're like, block them.
I no joke. I have no, like, this is the thing, like, because some people are like, I don't want to hear it, and they're still going to be jerks about it. And like, if
Yeah.
you apologize, like, and like, if you've apologized, you've taken the criticism, and people are being hateful. I mean, there's one thing with
Mhm,
like valid criticism or critique, but if people are being hateful, like, yeah, block them. Like, you don't need
yeah.
that. That's, yeah.
Mhm. I 100% agree. And like, I would say for the flip side, for viewers, I was like, just be mindful that the creator is a person at the end of the day.
Yeah.
Like, just put yourself like, if you just like put yourself in their shoes, like, especially if I was that viewer and I received a message like that, my first reaction was like, okay, who's this person? Let me let me drop my message right now. It's probably gonna be I'm gonna say some things I shouldn't say, but you get me right. You hit because like
Yeah.
it's natural to feel a little bit attacked when someone calls you out and
Yeah.
you weren't expecting that, especially if you didn't think you did something wrong, or like you said,
Yeah.
you had a blind spot. And I think too, a little times in BookTube, like you almost have to be a little bit careful with like opinions or like talking about things or having a strong opinion on something. I think we have to keep in mind that it is perfectly okay to agree to disagree. You can have two different points of view on the same issue, and just because booktuber A has this opinion and you think is particularly hurtful, you don't have to agree with that opinion. Now, so one thing if it's just harmful and factually wrong,
Hmm.
then that's a whole different thing. But if it's like something that's open ended, where there is no right or wrong answer, I
Yeah.
think too we have to be like, especially when you come into books and you say, "Oh, I didn't like this popular book,"
Oh,
and then you're getting hate messages like before we started recording, we mentioned Leanne and Brandon Sanderson and
yeah.
that whole situation, and
Yeah.
that's just a book. Like you're
Yeah.
allowed to have opinions on what the author did in that book. And it doesn't mean that that's like the 100% right opinion that everyone should subscribe to, but you can just agree to disagree. Like
Yeah.
that person didn't love it, you loved it. It doesn't detract from your love from the book. Just love what you love and then just like
Yes.
block out those reviews.
Yes.
Because I
Yes.
think that can get weaponized too in cancel culture too as well. Like they said this about da 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 da, or they said this problematic thing happened in this book. I completely disagree. I'm like, that's normal.
Yeah.
We're we give our opinions on books that we read.
Yeah.
Opinions are not going to be for everyone. It's okay to disagree. That's normal. But like, don't take it and like, because I sometimes see it cross more into like it gets personal. where they feel like, oh, I love this book with all my heart, and they take that opinion like
Yeah.
as a personal attack. And
Yeah.
I get that. Like if you love something, you're more closely tied to it. But like try to I know like social media emotions are not the greatest combination. So just try to keep those a little bit separate. Like take a breather before
Yeah.
you initially react. Because then I bet you in that 5 minutes that you took to like think about what
Yeah.
you were going to do, it will completely change your reaction. So like that's my little 2 cents.
Yes, I agree. Yeah, this comes up more than you would think, I feel like.
Um,
It's just
you would think in 2021 we think we would have already sailed past this. Like it's
no,
okay if
no.
you don't agree.
Oh man, no, it's funny. Well, and that's the thing is like we can like different things. Also, like we have different experiences with a book. Like we bring different things to the table, we notice different things, and that's okay. Um, I have very good friends where we have very different opinions on some books, like, and we're still friends. Like
Friends.
that's okay. I mean, I think that's the thing is for books that I love and have an intense emotional attachment to, I just don't watch negative reviews of those books because I know it's going to make me upset. So I'm like, if this is a book that, like, not only did I love it, but like there was something
Mhm.
emotionally meaningful to me of it. Like, there aren't very many books I feel that way about, but like there are some. I don't watch the negative reviews. I'm like, you're welcome to have your opinion. I can't I can't hear it right now. So that's fine.
And that's a perfect way. One of the perfect ways to like handle those situations. Like you just don't watch it. Like if you know like
Yeah.
by the title or like the thumbnail that it may be like a slightly negative or like a really negative review of something that you
Yeah.
like why would you cause yourself that agony if you love that thing so much? I'm like sometimes it's just better just to say
Yeah.
like, okay, that video is not for me. I know if I watch it, I will
Yeah.
feel some type of way. It's almost protecting your own mental
Yeah.
health and your
Yeah.
own sanity by
And
like
you know
saying
what?
no.
Yes, yes. And if you do watch it, you just have to take responsibility for those feelings because they're your fault. Like, case in point, I am friends with Jess Owens, who does Book Community. I love her. She's wonderful.
Mhm.
We have we had dramatically different opinions on A Court of Silver Flames, which is okay. It made me cry and like spoke to me and I loved it and she hated it and I watched her review and I should not have, but I was like this is on me if I'm having feelings about how much you hated this.
Like I hate it, but like when you know something, when you know you're gonna get a negative version of something that you love and you still click on it, I'm like, I'm sorry.
Like it was my own fault. I take
Like you can't be mad at the
responsibility.
creator. The
No,
creator was just like voicing their opinions.
it's fine. We're still friends. It's all good.
And
Like,
that's how it should be. Like you
yeah.
disagree, like not every book is made for everyone.
No,
Everyone's
no.
gonna have like their book. Like I can have like my favorite book of all time, and then like you just like absolutely like tear it to shreds. And I'm watching a review like crying, like how could Bethany do this to my favorite book?
I feel so bad because sometimes I get people in the comments being like, "What? I love that," and I'm like, I'm
I'm
always
sorry.
like, "I'm sorry. I'm so glad you enjoy it. That's awesome." Like, it just wasn't for me. Well, and similarly, I had at one time I had a commenter who was like, "You recommended this book to me and I hated it. Why would you say I should read it?" I was like, "I'm sorry you didn't have a great experience with it. I really liked it."
I feel like romance authors, like some of the authors that I talked to said it perfectly. Like, if you don't like my book, there's like probably 20 other books that will fit exactly what you like.
Yeah,
So like
yeah.
just go like if you try it and you don't like it, that's
Go read
fine.
something else.
Like don't read the same don't keep on reading my work and thinking you're gonna get something different. Just
No.
go like if you want something very specific, there's probably an author out there for you that is doing exactly what you like. So I'm like, at the end of the day, just do you. Like we're all people, keep a level head. Like you'll get through it if you get canceled. you will get through it. You will grow. Like, we all will make mistakes, but I think we all should just have the grace to give each other the same amount of chance to like grow and change and learn. And I think that's a hopeful into point on this conversation. So it doesn't seem like we're being negative. I hope no one watching this video thinks we're being negative. There's actually positives. We do like not just cancel culture, but the idea of accountability, I should say.
Absolutely.
And keeping creators and keeping people in power in check. I think it's important. And we're not discounting that, but also like with everything, there's pros and cons to every single thing. And I hope this video is interesting to you guys watching. And I want to say thank you again, Bethany, for coming on my channel. This was so much fun talking to you. Like, really immediately when I thought of this topic, I was like, okay, Bethany has to be the one to do this video. Like, this is gonna be the easiest conversation ever. I think it's gonna be so fascinating. And yeah, I just love what you're doing in the booktube community. I'm a fan. So thank you so much for coming on my channel.
Thanks for having me. This was a lot of fun.
And just so you guys know, I'll link Bethany's channel down below in the description box. So definitely go subscribe to her. Subscribe to all her social medias, Instagram, Twitter, and Book Talk as well. I see you on Book Talk.
It's fun. It's so much fun.
I applaud you guys for who are on Book Talk. I'm like, I can't. I'm already behind with YouTube and Instagram. Like, no, I can't add it up.
I understand. I mean, I've been falling behind on Instagram, I think, because of it. But like, I'm just like, it's so creatively satisfying for me. Like, I really enjoy it. And I can be silly. Like, I feel like, I think that's the thing. Like, I don't know. I need to give some thought to if there's a way to integrate this to my YouTube channel. But I feel like I tend to be more serious on most of my YouTube videos. And Book Talk lets me be more silly, which is fun. So, yeah.
But I enjoy everything you post on all your platforms. So I'm like, I'm not on Book Talk, but I subconsciously, I follow you from when you post it on your Instagram. That's how I keep in touch with Book Talk. I'm like, on principle, I'm not opening a Book Talk. I'm sorry.
Fair enough.
Like, there's people out there who do it better. Like, I'm focusing on YouTube and Instagram. That's like where my focuses are.
Yeah.
But like, I applaud everyone who's doing amazing work on Book Talk and like getting the romance book some love. Like, I'm all for it.
Yeah.
But thank you guys again for watching this video. Let me know down in the comment section down below what are your thoughts on this topic, and I'll catch you guys with a brand new video. Bye, everyone.